1,000 plus, and it goes quick. It's really amazing how okay, thank you so much for your time. We'll get the winners back, top two winners.
So, if you're joining with us, and this is later, we're just getting things started. Wednesdays at Westside, the meal part is wrapping up, and so we will get the class going in just a couple of minutes. Hi, Cindy and Tim. And so, yeah, give us a couple of minutes, and we will get things going.
I think I'm making a bad decision to just start handing this stuff out.
Okay.
Well,
Well, good evening. I'm going to invite you all to move forward, maybe, because we're kind of spread out.
I don't want to get too close. It's like being in front.
Testing one, there we go.
I don't like to get too close because it's like being in the front row of the theater.
Oh yeah, I know. Thank you. You got Richard Jeff today, huh?
Okay, well, if you are joining online, we are taking a couple of extra minutes because this was our last Wednesdays at Westside until April 24th, and so we have a special trivia night. So if you're joining with us live or you're going to watch this later, this is our last night, and then we're going to take a 3-week break. Next week is spring break. The week after that is Holy Week. The week after that, preschool will be doing a cleaning night. And then we will come back and we will have 5 more weeks. There's going to be 2 classes that get offered. A continuation of this one, which will actually enable us to finish out the Sermon on the Mount. We had 15 lessons that we could have done, and we only have been able to do 10 of them. And then there's going to be one on how to raise a tech-wise family. And, I think the reality is not just denying all technology, but how to utilize technology in a good way. And so Bill's going to be our teacher for tonight, and I'm going to hand things over to him.
Good evening. Hold on a minute. Let me put out my notes, and I'll be right there. Everybody's got a crib sheet. Well, thanks for joining us online on Facebook. Really glad you joined us. I look forward to tonight's conversation a lot. Renee and I were up at... while I was out, did Ralph open us in prayer?
I did not.
No.
Okay, let me open this in prayer. Heavenly Father, you shower us with blessings and riches and joys, and the world doesn't understand what you mean by riches, and you share with us that joy and that peace that comes from being you're a child of God, and the absolute incredible riches that come from serving you on behalf of you for others. You know, the world doesn't know how to measure that. And just want to thank you tonight again for opening my eyes and heart to understand what you mean by riches. Amen. Well, Renee and I were up at Coyote Ridge Correction Center this afternoon for a class called God's Story, Your Story. And tomorrow we'll be back doing the humble servant. And, you know, it's just wonderful being up there with these men. Our goal is to create disciple makers and fill Coyote Ridge Correction Center up with disciple makers. That's my dream and my vision. And the discussions we have are awesome. So I shared a little bit with them today about what we're going to be talking about. And, you know, we just have terrific discussions, and I wanted to introduce the men to some of the ideas we'll bring up tonight. Our classes, this one we're at about 20. You know, we used to get 20 guys, and some of them are just on fire, and we love it up there. So we're going to talk about how to build a secure future, and you know, I opened the prayer with the idea of riches, and you talk to somebody maybe from the world that hasn't found Jesus, and you say, well, let's talk about a secure future. And, well, we better check how we build retirement accounts, investments, and buy stocks, and, you know, that's what will come to their mind when you say, build a secure future. So, we're going to approach it differently than what the world approaches it tonight. And we're in the Sermon on the Mount. And this portion of the Sermon on the Mount is about a secure future that God wants us to understand. And the portion of the Sermon on the Mount is Matthew 7:24 through 29. And when you see your notes, you'll see that first verse shows up twice. And that was my mistake. So let me read that. Therefore, anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority, and not as their teachers of the law. So he was showing them something different in a person than what they expected. I'm speaking with authority here. So I would like to just focus for a minute again on what the Sermon on the Mount was about. It wasn't given as the way of salvation. Jesus is preaching to his disciples, and crowds gathered that listened to him. But he was talking to people that have accepted him and were the children of the kingdom. He's teaching them how to follow Jesus, how to be a disciple, and eventually a disciple maker. He's transforming a disciple's life. And, one thing, we go into Coyote Ridge, and I've been going in for 8 years, and I've never transformed a life, not once. And there's nobody on our team has. God's the one that transforms the life, and that's what this is about. So you can see the class notes summary first 9 sessions, and they're all about growing as a disciple. They're all about the attributes of a disciple. I won't go through each of them. So we're going to talk about how to build a secure future. So, well, first, a problem comes up because how do you build a secure future if you can't predict the future? I'm not sure you can. So, to build a secure future, I think we have to understand the future. And our prediction of the future, they're subject to unknown circumstances. I mean, how do you predict the future where the circumstances are unknown? You know, in 1876, the British Post Office director, and he's got this big group of government agents and employees and all of that. You would think that with all of that at his disposal, he could predict the future about what he was an expert in. So his prediction in 1876 was, we will never have telephones in England like they do in America because we have enough messenger boys. Now, how could this guy with this big army of employees not even be able to predict the future where he's an expert at? Or 1925, you've heard of Warner Films and Warner Brothers. Well, Harry Warner basically started the movie industry, and in 1925 he said, nobody wants to hear actors talking. We don't need that in movies. Now, this is a guy that was an expert in entertaining people. How could he get the future wrong for where he was an expert? And, Thomas Watson, he was the chairman of IBM. And in 1943, they had computers. Something about the power of an iPhone would fill this room. And he said, it's ridiculous to even comprehend a computer in a house. That's unfathomable. This guy had armies of scientists and engineers, and he couldn't predict the future for where he was an expert. Well, Bill Gates said the internet won't ever be used by common people. What are these guys missing?
Everything.
I mean, they got these armies of experts around them, and they can't predict the future. Well, Yogi Berra wasn't that far off. Catcher for the New York Yankees, and baseball manager, and he was let's call him a philosopher for the common man, So he said, it's tough to make a prediction, especially about the future, unless. So predictions are subject to unknown circumstances unless. It's tough to make a prediction about the future unless. Well, unless what? Unless what? So I'm going to use a word throughout. The word circumstance. Now the first time you're going to hear me use it and you're going to, whoa, that's not a circumstance. Well, I went to the dictionary to make sure I was using it correctly. A fact or condition connected with or relevant to an event or action. So, the unless part of predicting the future. Now, you can predict the future with absolute certainty, accuracy, and perfection if you have 3 things in place. 1, a circumstance is in place that is known, foundational, and unchangeable forevermore. You can predict with boldness. That's getting close to what we need. But we don't need to just hear this circumstance. We have to put this circumstance to use. So, if a guy walks to my door and says, I've got this treasure map, Columbia River, 10 feet off the shore, 6 feet down is this treasure of gold. This map is absolutely perfect, accurate, and 100% reliable, and he's right, and I believe he's right. That doesn't make me rich. Just having the knowledge doesn't make me rich. Just having the knowledge of that circumstance doesn't make me rich. I've got to do something about it. So, we have to act on the circumstance, but then we have to have the foundation and the strength and the ability to withstand and deal with the unknown circumstances. So, the given circumstance, you want to predict the future with 100% accuracy, perfectly. If you have those three conditions in place, we can do it. So what's the first condition? A given circumstance. Well, I'm going to suggest that given circumstance that is foundational, never changes, never will change, you can take it to the bank, is Jesus. Now, I can study Jesus' life for 30 years, and I've got knowledge of Jesus, right? But it doesn't do me any good. It's like knowing that treasure chest is along the Columbia River. And if I don't do something about it, so I have the given circumstance, but that's not good enough. That's not quite where I need to be. So we have to have the circumstances we control. So what can we control? One, we can open our heart to hearing and living the good news, right? So we've got the circumstance in place, and we know we have to take the action and use that circumstance and that knowledge. So now that we have a circumstance that we know is foundational, we have to redefine what a secure future is. A secure future isn't about the IRA accounts and the investments portfolio. We're talking about a secure future that we look at through the lens of Jesus, and the ability of looking to the future through the lens of Jesus to be prepared for those uncertain circumstances. Now, we have to recognize that a secure future means not just what is seen. We have to be prepared for what we can't see. And I'm going to suggest that IRA accounts and investments don't prepare you for all the things you don't see, but there is something that does. Everybody see the movie Titanic with Leonardo DiCaprio? Okay. The captain is approaching out in the North Atlantic and approaching this iceberg. What did he see? He saw this. He saw this sticking out of the water. And so that's what he saw. Now he thought, I'm going to give my passengers a kind of a little close-up view of this iceberg. This doesn't happen very often. But he either ignored what he was had been trained at, or he didn't know what was unseen. And instead of this, it was this, huge, underneath water. So getting close to that little what poked out of the water wasn't all he needed to know. He didn't have complete knowledge. So we have to be ready for what is not seen. And if we go back to Matthew, 7:24, it says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock." That's the NIV. And then in 7:26, "But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand." Now, what you might see between the wise man and the rich man is this lavish house, right? You might see a lavish house, but what you don't see is what's underpinning that house. You don't see maybe high debts and credit cards run up. Same way with, you might see the expensive car, but you don't see what's really going on. So we have the wise man who built his house on a foundation. Now, the comparison here probably fit the times and the geography and Jesus' background. He knew something about carpentry and building. His dad was a carpenter. He was trained as a carpenter. And he probably knew something about the geology around there, because around the Sea of Galilee are what they call alluvial sands. Now, I don't know how far out they go. But evidently, there were people that had built their house on that. And the reason they were tempted to is during the summer, those sands would get rock hard. It would be rock hard. And to get down to the bedrock for the foundation that would last, they'd have to go about 10 feet through those alluvial sands and get down to the hard rock. So the difference was between the man that built his house on the bedrock and that built a house was time, effort, energy, knowledge, knowing the circumstance, and then acting on what they knew. The wise man had the knowledge of the geography, and he acted on it. He didn't take the easy way out. So, the one circumstance that will never, ever change, that we can build our foundation on of spiritual life, spiritual maturity, is Jesus. That is rock solid. And to do it takes more than knowledge. You have to know more than the geography. You have to do something about it. So it seems like that this parable of building on the foundation is a difference with two alternatives, and there probably isn't a third: wise versus foolish. And we can take the foolish way out and just study Jesus. We can take the foolish way out and just study him, or not even study him. So we have to start building a strong foundation. What Jesus was really objecting to here and speaking out against was the foundation the Pharisees tried to create at that time, the foundation of blind obedience to the law, and misconstruing that as being a relationship with God. So, personally, if we build a strong foundation, we're going to have to start asking tough questions. Some people don't like tough questions. Don't like to ask tough questions have tough questions asked of them. They don't like to ask tough questions of themselves. And it's the answer that they don't like. And I went through that phase. I ducked the tough questions because I didn't want the answer. It's easy not to ask the question. So the tough questions would be, why are we here? We've got this potential foundation if we do something about it, but the acting on it, we have to start asking these tough questions. Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? And okay, I'm building this bedrock. I'm building this relationship with God. I'm creating it. I'm starting to see that I'm a child of God. And it's starting to affect me. So, I want to build my purpose on bedrock. I want to have a purpose that's built on bedrock. Building a purpose on sand is like a house built on sand. It will crumble. A purpose will crumble. It will be haphazard. It won't be meaningful. It's interesting. Many years ago, in terms of explaining how important it is to understand our purpose, Bishop Leslie Newbigin tells his story when he was a schoolboy. Of course, it's been years ago. He was a schoolboy, and he was at this big Boy Scout jamboree in Liverpool. And about that time, just before they had this jamboree, this new substance had been unleashed on the world. And it was said to be edible. Just came out. And it was called shredded wheat. So that morning, he tells this story that they handed out the shredded wheat around the camp. Now, it must have been in bulk. And by 10 o'clock, they started getting, some of the leaders coming in saying, these pot scrubbers are worthless. So, they didn't get the purpose right of the shredded wheat they were supposed to eat. They were using it to scrub their pots, and of course it disintegrated. So he was making that point. You really have to understand your purpose. I think purpose in life changes. I think our bedrock gets even deeper and deeper and deeper. And, our purpose may start out with our toe in the water. But I can tell you when your purpose starts influencing your life, more opportunities miraculously show up in front of you. It's amazing how that happens. But with the right bedrock, with the bedrock of Jesus and a relationship with God, that purpose always is for something good. And, that's what the riches are, is experiencing the joy of that purpose. So, but it doesn't happen without this bedrock of a relationship with God, understanding God, having the knowledge and acting on it. So, and it brings up the question, what should I be doing with my life? And it's not static. It will change, it will evolve, and that's okay. But we're not going to experience that unless we ask tough questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? And really interrogating it and being prepared to hear some tough answers. Guess it was about 7 years ago, my daughter came up to Renee, her mom, my wife, and this is after I'd been going into Cuddy Ridge for about a year or 2 years. And she said, if you had told me 5 years ago that my dad would be going into prison with what he's doing, I would have said, you're crazy. That's not a predictable future. That was a comment she took to Renee. See, it wasn't a predictable future. Because prior to that, I really wasn't building my house on a bedrock. I came to church. I came to Westside, yeah. Been to a lot of churches, but that bedrock wasn't there. It really wasn't. And can't explain it. But that bedrock started forming, and I wanted it to form, and I wanted to build down to the bedrock. So I didn't expect that future. I wasn't able to predict that future. I mean, it was unfathomable to I guess when I look back. Yeah, wow, no wonder people were scratching their heads. So I decided I had a purpose then, and my bedrock can always be deeper and stronger, but it was adequate to really get me started and get my house built appropriately. So you never know what your future's going to be. But I know my future now. I wouldn't have predicted my future 10 years ago. I will now. I will boldly predict my future. And I will be absolutely unerring, accurate, guaranteed. My future's going to be serving God in any way I can. And that's all I need to know about my future, and I won't be wrong. I won't be like Thomas Watson and how he messed up predicting no computers at home. I will know my future. And I'm blessed with knowing that. I mean, the certainty that brings to me. And to know that bedrock's there and people are helping me build it, because I can't do it by myself. To dig down 10 feet through alluvial sands to bedrock would be impossible for me. But so others are there lifting me up and supporting me and correcting me when I still make mistakes. And I do. So, but as they correct, that's another piece of mortar into that bedrock that makes that bedrock stronger, and it will just support me better. So we need to think long term, adequate time to think and plan. Matthew 7:24, part of that says, the wise man, he puts them into practice. And the short-term guy is about instant gratification. Matthew 7:26, about the foolish man, does not put them into practice. So it's not enough to have the knowledge, This just doesn't cut it. And there are different results. Both when you're building a house and when you're building your foundation. You're going to get different results. If I had changed and built a better foundation 8 years ago, the results would have been dramatically different, or say 10 years ago, dramatically different than what the results would look like today. The house of today may not be as lavish as one 10 years ago, but the house of today that I'm building is maybe not as lavish, a lot stronger, a lot sturdier, everlasting. So we have to respond to Jesus. That's the wise man. He was responding to what he knew. Like I mentioned before, knowing Jesus isn't enough. And I mean intellectual knowing. You can study Jesus and what he ate for breakfast and all of his routes of his ministry and all the details, get into that. But that's intellectual. That's not quite enough. Admire him. That's not enough. Because think about when he was preaching to the crowds. And here, he was preaching to the disciples. He was showing them what a disciple is, and crowds gathered. Now, it could be, I don't know, but it could be that there was some guy up on a cliff looking at this, some kind of warrior, when he go out and do battle. And he looked at Jesus and boy, I really admired him. I got to figure out how he attracts people, because I need that to bring more warriors onto my camp. So admiring Jesus wasn't enough. That warrior that admired him for the wrong reason had to do more than that. He had to follow him. Then he's becoming a wise man, right? He's starting to build his foundation, right? He has to obey him. Okay, so somebody might say, okay, so you're going to obey, so you're creating this checklist so you can show it at the pearly gates and get your pass into heaven. Well, I don't know what the outcome of that confrontation would be at the pearly gates. I'm not going to suggest what it may or may not be, because I don't know. But we take action by putting his words into practice out of love for him, not as a to-do list. And Romans 2:13, for it is not those who hear the law who are righteous in God's sight, but it is those who obey the law who will be declared righteous. So, my motives changed. My motives changed when they changed the foundation I was living on. My motives changed. So, and through it all, it's important to just get our feet planted back on the ground, come back to earth, and read Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So, I want to go back to the point we made earlier. The Sermon on the Mount wasn't given as the way of salvation for the lost, but as the way of life for the children of the kingdom. The essence of discipleship, transforming a disciple's life. A call to repentance, Jesus setting out who he is, and we recognize that we can't live like this without the help of the Spirit. That's the power. And for me, I like to look at my foundation as not just being something below me. I like to look at my foundation as God above me, Jesus beside me, and the Holy Spirit within me. So, I think this is a good parable. I think it's just part of a disciple-making manual, which it really was, right? And so that I've shared with you some of my personal journey. And things have changed for me by building a different foundation, and a foundation that I can predict accurately in the future. Now, how many people outside of us can say that if they haven't found Jesus? How many can say, I can predict my future with 100% accuracy? If we haven't found Jesus, we can't make that prediction. So I want to thank you out in Facebook land for joining us. And if you have any comments, I'm sure you have the questions there. You can begin your discussion group, and we'll form our discussion group here. But thanks for being here. look forward to hearing back from you. Any comments? Thank you. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.